The year is 2023. The office is quiet. Sunlight cuts across a polished mahogany desk. Daniel Miller sits in his father's old chair. He is the president of Farmers Trust and Loan, the same bank his father, Frank Miller, ran for 40 years. Daniel is looking at a spreadsheet, a list of the bank's top depositors. Most of the names are familiar: Consolidated Ag, Midwest Grain, the big operations that farm fence line to fence line. Then he sees a name he knows for a different reason: Hayes Family Organics. And beside it, a number, a liquid cash balance that makes him stop breathing for a second. He leans closer to the screen. He runs the number again. It's not a mistake. He opens another file, the bank's payroll records from 1998, the year his father retired at the top of his game. He finds Frank Miller's final salary, a good salary, the salary of a respected man who ran the most important financial institution in the county. Daniel puts the two numbers side by side, the cash cleared by Hayes Family Organics last year, and his father's peak salary. The farm's number is larger, considerably larger. Daniel Miller pushes his chair back from the desk. The leather makes a soft, sighing sound. He remembers his father talking about that farm, about the boy who tried to get a loan for it. He remembers the exact phrase his father used at the dinner table more than once: a sad shake of the head, a look of genuine pity. Such a shame. That boy is running a little hobby farm. He'll be broke in 5 years. This channel tells the stories of people who were counted out, people who were told no, people who were dismissed by men who were certain they were right. If you believe these stories need to be told, if you believe that proving people wrong takes decades, not moments, hit subscribe. Because what happened on that hobby farm changed more than just one family's fortune. It changed the land itself. Let me tell you about Arthur Hayes. It begins in the spring of 1982. Arthur Hayes was 24 years old. He stood in the lobby of Farmers Trust and Loan. The floor was cool, checkered marble. The air smelled of old paper and quiet money. Arthur had dirt under his fingernails, not because he was careless, but because he had come straight from the fields, his family's fields. 62 acres of tired soil. His father had died the previous winter, a heart that just gave out in the middle of a cold January morning. His mother had passed 2 years before that. The farm and its modest debt now belonged to him. He walked to the teller window, asked to see Mr. Miller. Frank Miller wasn't just the bank president. He was a fixture, a man who served on the church council, coached Little League for 20 years. His word was solid. His judgment was trusted. He knew the Hayes family, had known them for decades. He greeted Arthur with a warm, sad smile. "Come on in, son. Sit down." The office was paneled in dark wood. Photographs of Frank with prize-winning cattle, a plaque from the Rotary Club. It was the office of a man who understood how the world worked, especially how this part of the world worked. Frank folded his hands on the big desk. "I was so sorry to hear about your father, Arthur. A good man, a hard worker." Arthur nodded. "Thank you, sir." He was. Frank leaned forward. His voice was gentle, concerned. "What can I do for you?" Arthur took a deep breath. He slid a folder across the desk. It was thin, a few pages of notes, a hand-drawn map of the 62 acres, a list of equipment. "Mr. Miller, I need an operating loan, $22,000. Frank opened the folder. He scanned the pages. His expression didn't change. He was a man who had seen 1,000 of these proposals. He saw the map, saw the soil composition reports Arthur had paid for himself. He saw the list of seeds, not just corn, not just soybeans, dozens of items: heirloom tomatoes, raspberry canes, apple rootstock. Cover crops Arthur had written in the margins: clover, vetch, rye. Frank closed the folder. He looked at Arthur. The look was not unkind. It was patient, the way a teacher looks at a student who has the answer completely wrong. Arthur, your father was a good farmer, but he couldn't make a living off this land with corn and beans. Not on 62 acres. The numbers don't work. You know that. Arthur's voice was steady. I'm not farming corn and beans, sir. I'm going to farm differently. Direct to market. A farm stand. Maybe sell to some restaurants in the city. Build the soil back up. It won't take chemicals. It'll take time. Frank Miller listened. He nodded slowly. He genuinely listened. This is what made him so respected and so dangerous. He didn't dismiss people. He heard them out. And then he explained to them, gently, why they were wrong. I see what you're trying to do, son. I really do. It's an admirable idea, this new kind of farming. I've read the magazines, but this is the real world. This county runs on number 2 yellow corn. It runs on combines that cost more than a house. It runs on economies of scale. You're talking about a garden, a big garden. Arthur felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. It's not a garden, Mr. Miller. It's a diversified farm. The model is more resilient. It doesn't depend on a single commodity price. Frank held up a hand, a gentle paternal gesture. Stop. Let me be honest with you, for your father's sake. The bank cannot make this loan. It's too risky. The collateral isn't there. The business plan, well, it's not a business plan we can underwrite. It's a dream. I'm not going to be the man who helps you lose your family's land. The silence in the room was heavy. Arthur looked at the folder on the desk. His whole future was in that folder. Frank saw the look on his face. He felt a pang of real sympathy. He thought he was being kind. He believed he was protecting this young man from certain failure. He leaned forward again. Now, here is what I can do. I can approve a personal loan for, say, $30,000. Enough for you to sell the farm, pay off the existing mortgage, put a down payment on a small house in town. You have a sharp mind, Arthur. You could go back to school, get a degree in business. You could even work here at the bank one day. Leave the farming to the big boys. It's a tough life. It's not for everyone anymore. What you're running out there... He paused, searching for the right words, the kindest words. It's a hobby farm, son, and a man can't feed a family on a hobby. The words hung in the air. Hobby farm. It wasn't an insult. It was a diagnosis, delivered with care, meant to save him. Arthur stood up. He picked up his folder. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked at Frank Miller, a long, quiet look, and he said 2 words. Thank you. Then he turned and walked out of the office, out of the bank, into the bright, unforgiving sunlight. He got into his father's old Ford pickup. The engine turned over on the 3rd try. He drove the 7 miles home. He didn't see the trees. He didn't see the other farms. He just heard those 2 words in his head, over and over. Hobby farm. He pulled into the driveway. The house needed paint. The barn roof was patched in 3 different places. His grandfather was sitting on the porch swing. Elias Hayes was 85 years old. His hands were gnarled from a lifetime of work. His eyes were still clear. He watched Arthur walk up the steps. He didn't ask. He waited. Arthur sat down on the top step. He stared out at the fields. The soil was pale, tired. He said it plain. The bank said no. Elias kept rocking. A slow, steady rhythm. The chains of the swing made a soft, complaining sound. Did Frank Miller say why? Arthur's voice was flat. He said, "I'm running a hobby farm." He said he'd lend me money to sell it, but not to work it. Elias stopped rocking. He looked at his grandson. He looked at the land his own father had bought, the land that had buried his son. He was silent for a full minute. Then he spoke. His voice was rough, like stones in a dry creek bed. They can refuse the money. That's their right. Money is a tool they own. But they can't refuse the dirt. The dirt belongs to you. He leaned forward. He pointed a crooked finger at the field. They took everything from my father in the Depression. Everything. The equipment, the seed, the livestock. Everything except the dirt. He looked back at Arthur. The dirt is enough. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. A law of nature. Arthur looked at his grandfather, and then back at the land. Something shifted inside him. The cold knot of shame and anger began to dissolve. It was replaced by something else, something hard and quiet. Resolve. He stood up. Okay. That was all he said. The decision was made, not in a banker's office, but on a sagging porch step. The dirt is enough. That night, Arthur opened his father's old ledger. He drew a line under the last entry, and on a fresh page, he wrote a new heading: Hayes Family Farm, Year 1. He had $2,112 in his savings account. He had a 1961 Allis-Chalmers G tractor with a cracked engine block. He had 62 acres of depleted soil, and he had his grandfather's words: "The dirt is enough." Let me tell you what he did with it. The first 2 years were about survival and invention. The Allis-Chalmers G was a small, nimble tractor, perfect for what Arthur had in mind, if it ran. He couldn't afford a mechanic, so he became one. He bought a used engine manual for $5. He spent a week in the barn with grease up to his elbows. He pulled the engine apart piece by piece, cleaned every valve, replaced every gasket. He found a hairline crack in the block. He learned how to weld cast iron from a library book, a slow, patient process of heating and stitching the metal back together. His neighbors watched him, shook their heads. "Old Man Hayes' boy is trying to fix that rust bucket. He should just sell it for scrap." 2 weeks later, the little tractor coughed to life. A puff of blue smoke, then a steady, puttering rhythm, the sound of possibility. He couldn't afford plows and discs, so he didn't plow. He read about no-till farming, a radical idea in 1982. He built a seed drill from scrap metal and parts of an old corn planter. He planted cover crops, clover to fix nitrogen, rye to hold the soil. The other farmers laughed. "He's planting weeds. He's letting the fields go wild." Frank Miller heard the talk at the diner. He felt a quiet sadness. He had tried to help the boy. Arthur needed money for greenhouses. He didn't have any, so he built his own. He salvaged old windows from a school renovation, built cold frames for starting seedlings, low tunnels from PVC pipe and plastic sheeting. He spent the winter of 1982 in the barn, building, measuring, cutting, fastening. His hands were raw, his back ached, but every finished frame was a small victory, a tiny piece of independence. That first spring he planted, not in long monoculture rows, but in integrated beds. Tomatoes next to basil, lettuce shaded by pole beans, flowers to attract beneficial insects. It looked like a patchwork quilt, not a farm. The community doubt was a constant, low hum. He's doing it all wrong. It's a mess out there. He'll never make a dime. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, but by a friend. By someone who genuinely believed they were protecting you. Have you ever felt the weight of that kind certainty? The quiet pity in their eyes. It's a heavier burden than anger. You can't fight it. You can only outwork it. Drop a comment below and tell us about a time you had to prove a kind person wrong. Because what happened next wasn't about proving them wrong in a moment. It was about proving them wrong over the next 40 years. The first harvest was small. He loaded the back of the Ford pickup with boxes of tomatoes, lettuce, and beans. He drove to the city, set up a card table at a farmer's market. His sign was hand-painted, Hayes Family Farm. He sold everything he had in 3 hours. He came home with $427 in cash. He showed the money to his grandfather. Elias counted the bills. A good start. Arthur opened the ledger. He wrote down the date, the income, and the expenses: gas, seeds, jars for canning. At the end of the first year, he had cleared $3,800. It wasn't a living, but it was a proof of concept. And he had no new debt, not a penny. The dirt was enough. The years started to stack up, each one a new verse in the same song. Work, innovate, save, expand. By 1988, he had saved $17,000. The 12-acre woodlot next to his farm came up for sale. The soil was poor. The land was steep, useless for conventional farming. The owner was asking $18,000. Arthur went to him, offered $17,000, cash. The deal was done in an afternoon. His neighbors shook their heads. He bought the worst piece of land in the county. What's he going to do? Farm rocks and squirrels? Arthur didn't clear the trees. He thinned them. He used the timber to build a new barn. A proper barn, with a packing shed and a walk-in cooler. He did the work himself, with 2 friends. In the shade of the remaining oaks, he started growing mushrooms, shiitake, oyster, high-value crops that needed no sunlight. He used the sloped land for grazing, not cows, sheep. They could handle the terrain. They kept the weeds down. Their manure fertilized the soil. The sheep paid for themselves in 2 years. Then they started turning a profit. The farm was now 74 acres. A mosaic of vegetables, woods, and pasture, a living ecosystem. Frank Miller drove past one Sunday afternoon. He saw the new barn. He saw the sheep on the hill. He didn't understand it. It didn't fit the model he knew. It looked messy. But he also saw the cars lined up on the road for the farm stand. He saw the new delivery truck with Hayes Family Farm painted on the side. He felt something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't regret, not yet. It was confusion, a crack in his certainty. The expansion continued, slowly, patiently, one small piece at a time. 1992. The 20-acre parcel on the other side of the road went into foreclosure. The soil was clay. It held water. Bad for corn. Terrible for soy. The bank was auctioning it off. Arthur showed up on the day of the sale. The other farmers were there, but nobody wanted it. The auctioneer started the bidding. Arthur raised his hand, made a single bid, $25,000. Silence. Sold. He paid with a cashier's check. Cash. He didn't plant crops in the clay. He dug ponds. 3 of them. He stocked them with bass and bluegill. He used the water to irrigate his vegetable fields during the dry spells of August. He started a small, subscription-based fishing club, another stream of income, another piece of the puzzle. The farm was now 94 acres. Every inch of it was productive. Every part of it supported another part. The vegetable scraps fed the chickens. The chicken manure fertilized the fields. The sheep grazed the cover crops. The ponds irrigated the vegetables. It was a closed loop, efficient, resilient, debt-free. Contrast the math. His neighbors were taking on massive loans for bigger tractors, for more land, for patented seeds and expensive chemicals. They were leveraged to the hilt, praying for good weather and high commodity prices. Arthur had no debt. He set his own prices. He sold directly to the people who ate his food. His risk was managed by his diversity. If the tomato crop failed, the raspberries thrived. If the restaurant orders were slow, the farm stand was busy. He was building a different kind of wealth. Not just money, but soil, water, community. By the year 2000, the farm was a local institution. His grandfather Elias had passed away peacefully in his sleep. He was buried in the small family plot at the edge of the woods. Arthur was married now, to a woman who understood the vision, who worked beside him. They had 2 children, a boy and a girl. They grew up with the taste of real food, with the feel of dirt under their fingernails. The farm stand was now a real store. They sold their own produce and meat and eggs and products from other small farmers who were trying to do the same thing. Arthur was becoming a mentor, a hub. The man the bank had called a hobbyist was now the center of a new kind of rural economy. Frank Miller was retired. He'd see Arthur in town sometimes, at the post office, the hardware store. Arthur was always polite. "Hello, Mr. Miller." Frank would nod. "Arthur, good to see you." But he never asked about the farm. He couldn't bring himself to do it. To admit that the world he was so certain about, the rules he had enforced with such kindness, might not be the only rules. The witness who watches from a distance. Sometimes that is its own form of justice. The quiet, relentless evidence of success, year after year, decade after decade. The farm grew. 2005. He bought the 50 acres behind the woods. Cash. 2012. He bought the neighboring farm when the owner retired. 120 acres. A farm he once would have considered a giant operation. He paid for it, in full, with cash. He didn't plow it under. He began the slow work of converting it, healing the soil, planting trees, restoring the waterways. He was thinking in generations now, not just seasons, because this is where the story becomes bigger than one man and one farm. This is where it becomes a legacy. The reckoning came in the summer of 2018. It was a summer of brutal heat and no rain. A drought settled over the county like a shroud. The cornfields turned brown and brittle in July. The soybeans withered on the vine. The conventional farms were dying. The farmers who had borrowed against the fall harvest were facing ruin. The bank, Farmers Trust and Loan, was in trouble. Daniel Miller, Frank's son, was looking at a portfolio full of toxic farm debt. The model his father had believed in was breaking. The economies of scale didn't work when there was nothing to scale. But on Arthur Hayes's farm, things were different. The soil, rich with organic matter after decades of cover crops and compost, held water like a sponge. The deep-rooted perennials and trees could still find moisture. The ponds he had built were full. His irrigation systems were running. His fields were green. An oasis in a brown desert. His farm store was busier than ever. He was the only one with fresh produce. His profits that year were higher than ever. One afternoon in August, a car pulled into Arthur's driveway. An old Buick. Frank Miller got out. He was 87 years old now. Frail. He walked with a cane. Arthur was on the porch, fixing a broken chair. He saw Frank coming. He stood up, waited. Frank stopped at the bottom of the steps. He leaned on his cane. He looked at the lush green fields. He looked at the busy farm store. He looked at the house his own father had once thought would be sold off. He looked at Arthur, a man in his 60s now, his face weathered, his hands strong. "Hello, Arthur. Mr. Miller." Frank took a breath. "It's a bad year." Arthur nodded. "For some." Frank gestured with his cane toward the fields. "Not for you." "How?" It was the question he had been afraid to ask for 36 years. Arthur didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just answered. "The soil. I spent 30 years feeding the soil. Now it's feeding me." Frank looked at the ground, as if seeing it for the first time. "I was wrong." He said it quietly, the words he had rehearsed 100 times in his mind. "I came here to tell you that. I called your farm a hobby. I told you it would fail. I was wrong." Arthur listened. He looked at this old, tired man, the man who had tried to save him from his own dream. He felt no anger, no triumph, just a deep, quiet sadness for the cost of certainty. He finally spoke. His voice was gentle. "You weren't wrong, Frank. You just saw the world a certain way. You were sure of it. And certainty is a fence. Some people build it to keep trouble out, but they don't realize they're also building it to keep new ideas from getting in. I just learned how to farm on the other side of the fence. That's all." Frank Miller stood there for a long time. He looked at the farm that shouldn't exist, built by the man who shouldn't have succeeded. He finally understood. The most dangerous limitation is the one imposed by someone who genuinely believes they are protecting you. It cannot be fought with anger. It can only be disproven. With decades of work. With a lifetime of quiet resolve. He nodded, turned around, and walked back to his car. The conversation was over. The debt of dignity had been paid. The story doesn't end there, because a true legacy isn't what you build for yourself. It's what you build for others. Arthur Hayes didn't just build a farm. He built a model. In 2020, he helped establish the Green Valley Cooperative, a group of 20 small, diversified farms, just like his. They share equipment. They share knowledge. They market their products together. Most of them are run by young farmers, the kind of people who would walk into a bank today and be told their idea is a hobby. Arthur underwrote the co-op's first operating loan himself. He became the bank for the people the banks wouldn't fund. He established a scholarship at the State Agricultural College. It's not for students with the best grades. It's for the ones with the most creative, unconventional ideas about farming. The ones who want to work on the other side of the fence. His own children now help run the farm. His son manages the livestock and the pasture program. His daughter runs the direct-to-market business, which now ships to 3 states. They are not just farming. They are continuing the work of healing the land and proving that a different way is possible. The farm is over 500 acres now, but the heart of it is still that original 62. The tired soil that a young man was told to abandon. The dirt that was enough. Today, if you go to the farm, you can walk into the old barn, the one Arthur built with his own hands. On the wall, next to the tool bench, hangs a small, framed piece of paper. It's the first page from his father's old ledger. The page where he wrote, Hayes Family Farm, Year 1. The entries are faded now, written in a young man's determined hand. His granddaughter, who is studying soil science, sometimes stands there. She runs her finger over the glass. She knows the story. It's the story of her family, the story of the land, a story that began with a refusal, a kind, well-meaning no, a story that proves that the most powerful things don't grow from permission. They grow from the dirt, from resolve, from the quiet, stubborn belief that what you know in your gut is more real than what the experts know in their ledgers. Right now, somewhere in the world, a young person with a new idea is sitting in an office. Across a polished desk, a person in a position of authority is smiling kindly. They are explaining, with logic and experience, why it cannot be done. They are telling them their life's passion is a hobby. They believe they are helping. The story of Arthur Hayes is for that person. It's a reminder that the world is changed by people who hear no and see it not as a wall, but as a starting line. The work is harder that way. It's lonelier. It takes longer. But the foundation you build is your own. It is solid. It is real. And it can never be taken from you. If this story means something to you, if you've ever been that person in that chair, share this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear that they are not alone, that the dirt is enough. And subscribe for more stories about the quiet heroes who remake our world, 1 acre at a time. Thank you for listening.